Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binaries. Welcome to the 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum sponsored by the UP Institute for Creative Writing. Thank you very much for all the adjustments you had to make because of the suddenly rainy afternoon. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the presence of National Artist for Literature, Gemino Abad, whose book, The Light in One's Blood, Select Poems 1973 to 2020 is the subject of our forum this afternoon. Okay? So, before we begin, I would like to call upon the director of the UP Institute for Creative Writing, Dr. Romulo Bakiran, Joey Bakiran, to give his introductory remarks. Let's give him a round of applause.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Sa nakaraang mga iterations nitong IBF, Interdisciplinary Book Forum, nag-focus ang paksa sa agham panlipunan gaya ng ekonomiya at pamamahala tugon sa pangangailangan ng mambabasa at tao sa labas ng akademya. Nalalong kailangan din ang mga ganitong pakinabang at hindi lamang sa praktikal na buhay kundi higit sa pangkamalayan at pansining na tagpuan. Kung kamalayan ang usapan, wala nang mas okay na libro, kundi ang ating pag-uusapan ngayon, ang The Light in One's Blood. Selected Poems 1973-2020 ni Dr. Gemino Abad. Halos kalahating siglo ng pagmumuni sa tula ng ating katatanghal na pambansang alagad ng sining sa literatura. At bigatin din ang ating mga reaktor na mula sa hanay ng agham at kapwa sa hanay ng literatura. Kaya hindi na po tayo magpapatumpik-tumpik at simulan na natin ang talakayan sa Interdisciplinary Forum sa kanyang ika-7 anibersaryo. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bakiran. Call on the roster of panelists for today. Present here today is Dr. Ramon Guillermo. So, sir. Dr. Mahar Mangahas. Assistant Professor Christine Lau. And Mr. Ramil Gulye. I will provide introductions for our panelists as we go along. So now we would like to hear from the Chancellor of UP Diliman, Chancellor Edgardo Carlo L. Vistan. We would like to call him forward. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataon itong makasama kayo. No? Dean Jimwell Naval, our Director for the Institute of Creative Writing. Of course, our guest of honor, Jimmy Abad, our distinguished panel of reactors. Pleasant afternoon. Members of the faculty, students, other colleagues in the university. Hi, June. So, just to share, I was reading the invitation for this and I didn't really absorb yet what the event was, but when I saw it was for Jimmy, I'll go, whatever it is. And then it's only now really that I'm learning about what the Interdisciplinary Book Forum is about. It's only now also that I learned that the Office of the Chancellor actually supports or funds the project. So it was really all Jimmy that attracted me to this forum because I had, I suppose, a privilege of his generosity for one book project. I was asked to write a chapter, and the editors arranged a Zoom session where writers from UP actually critiqued and provided their comments for further improvement of our output or chapters. And Jimmy was one of those who reviewed my work and actually provided the most, I suppose, critical of the commentaries then. But it's really, for me, but that was Zoom, and that was actually my first encounter with Jimmy. And so I wanted to have this. I didn't even think of confirming if he will attend, but I just assumed, and happily he is here, and I met him in person for the first time. A national artist, a living legend, and I think that's what we should really truly appreciate for this event, especially our students. And we have to congratulate the organizers, the Interdisciplinary Book Forum, for giving us this opportunity to listen, interact with a living legend, a national artist for literature, Gemino Abad. And my last few words, and I apologize, I cannot really stay. I have another meeting in Quezon Hall. But I was talking to our director earlier. Since this is interdisciplinary, of course you have your interdisciplinary panel, but maybe, and anyway, since this is supported by the Office of the Chancellor, I'm sure we can make it happen. We can also make this sort of like a caravan across different units so that this can really be interdisciplinary. And we can also expose the non-literary members of the community to these activities and to these works. So I look forward to improving our interdisciplinary book forum in that way as I start my service as Chancellor. And I look forward, next time I hope I can really join you for the entire session. But my apologies, I have to leave this forum after I give this message. But thank you to the organizers for allowing our community to have this very valuable time and interaction with Jimmy Abad. Thank you very much. I wish you all a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Vistan. Before I introduce our panelists for today, I would like to call on our Dean at the College of Arts and Letters, Professor Jimwell Naval, to give his remarks.
Yes. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Nick. No? Magandang hapon. Good afternoon. Maayong hapon. National Artist, Jimmy Abad, Sir Jimmy, no? And of course, Director Joey Bakiran, no? Welcome to CAL, pero nasa SSP tayo. Sorry, nagkaroon ng problema ang aming hall kanina, aming room. Nagkaroon ng problema sa kuryente. So kaya dito tayo umakyat at maraming salamat sa College of Social Science and Philosophy. So, sa kabila nun, maglulugod ko kayong tinatanggap sa kolehiyo na nasa SSP. So, para sa 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum ng ICW, no? So, maraming salamat sa pag-imbita, no? Sa forum na ito upang suriin, kilatisin at bigyang pagpapahalaga ang libro ni Sir Jimmy na The Light in One's Blood, no? Na isang kalipunan ng mahigit 100 piling tula sa Ingles, no? Tiyak na magiging interesante, no, ang lahat ng naririto. Muulan kasi dapat maraming mga estudyante kaya lang nasa iba't ibang kolehiyo. Malakas ang ulan, no? O at maging mga makata o hindi, no? Dahil nga interdisciplinary, no? Dahil sa mga ekspertong magbibigay ng kanilang palagay sa mga berso ng ating makata at ay mula sa iba't ibang disiplina at larangan. No, siguradong marami tayong makikitang imahe sa pagitan ng linya na di pangkaraniwang nakikita, no, ng ibang makata, no, at ibang nag-aaral ng panitikan. Minsan din akong naging interesado sa mga berso ni Sir Jimmy Abad dahil sa kakaibang imahe na matatagpuan at patungkol sa anyong tubig na nasa ilalim, no, ibabaw at pusod ng dagat. So yun yung familiar ako sa mga tula niya, no. Kukumpara ko sana ito sa unang pag-aaral ko sa mga makatang Tagalog, katulad ni na Tom Agulto, ni na Teo Bailen, kasi nagbabanggit din sila ng elementong katulad, no, ng mga nasa dagat, no. At sa mga sandaling pag-imbestiga ko, nauwi ako sa paghahanap ng kanyang mga libro. Lalo na ang mga naunang sinulat, no. Pero dahil sa malagim na pangyayari noong 2016, no, sa Faculty Center, natin lahat 'yon, no. Kinain ng apoy. Sabi ng iba, hindi raw kinain ng apoy. Nilunod ng tubig ng bumbero. May ganun din eh. Laging kinain ng apoy. Pero yung iba naman talaga na-damage kasi nabasa. No, hindi na yung kakainin ng apoy. 'Di ba? Ang maraming libro na hinahanap ko, no? Pero may mga nailigtas ako. At yung isa sa nailigtas ko ay ang unang libro na sinulat ni Sir Jimmy Abad, National Artist, Fugitive Emphasis, 1973. Hardcover, hard books. Ito ay UP Press, sir, no? So pinablish ng UP Press, no? So nandito yung mga unang tula niya. Actually, hindi sa akin yung libro ngayon, sinabi kong sa akin eh. Hiniram ko yan kay Dr. Vivencio Jose, no? So at sinanap niya, sabi, nasa yung libro ko, buti na lang hiniram mo sa akin. Kasi kung hindi, nasunog din ito. No? So ngayon, mukhang ibinigay na nga niya sa akin. So, at ang isa pa, syempre, ito yung isa sa popular, no, na collection, no, bagamat editor si Sir Jimmy. So, familiar kayong lahat dito, no? A Habit of Shores, no? So, ito ay inilathala niya batay sa seniority, ano ba? Mula sa pinakamatanda at pinakabata. Alam niyo ang huling entry dito ng pinakabata, sabihin ko pa yung age eh, no? Lourdes Vera, 1975, no? Saka Chingbi, 1976. After nun, ang dami pang mga makata sa Ingles na sumulpot, no? Of course, Neil Garcia na andito, Wendell Capili na andito. So, kaya iniingatan ko. Pero mas interesante ako dito sa librong ito, no? At sinabi niya rin kanina, rare din ito, no? At ito'y alam ng lahat ng taga-UP sa buong Pilipinas. Alam niyo kung anong libro to? Eto. Who's Afraid of Ching the Dufalsa? Di ba? Meron ba kayo yan? So, si Ma'am Dadu, yung inabutan, yung freshman English. Di ba? So, naandito yun. Ang daming sumulat dito at hindi ko alam kung paano to inedit ni Sir Jimmy. So, pero ito ay 2000, I think 2002, no? Yung 80th birthday ni hindi ko siya naging teacher pero nakita ko siya, no, at nung inabutan pa rin, no, kasi nag-retire siya early 90s, no, parang ganon. So anyway, so kaya mamaya tingnan natin kung ano pang mga imahe na makikita mula sa iba't ibang punto de vista ng mga bisita na ipapakilala mamaya, no, sa na susuri at titingin sa kanyang mga libro. So, sabi ko nga, makikinig ako at magpapapirma, no, sa ating pambansang alagad ng sining na ipinagmamalaki kong nagmula sa College of Arts and Letters. So, pag binilang namin, kung isasama yung galing sa AS, no, meron na kaming 11 national artist mula sa aming kolehiyo. So, at alam ko, madadagdagan pa yan. So, daghang salamat, maraming salamat, at isang maulan na hapon sa inyong lahat.
So, as the Dean said, and I will be mangling, unfortunately, the words of Wordsworth, it is a rainy afternoon, windy but free, and we will spend holy time, sort of, because we will be listening not only to ideas from Dr. Abad, but also the ideas from our panelists today. So let me just say a few things about them. Okay? Dr. Ramon Guillermo is the director of the Center for International Studies, or CIS, and he was one of the first to engage with the emerging discipline of digital humanities in the Philippines. May mga publikasyon pong creative at research-based si Dr. Guillermo at natamo niya ang kanyang PhD in Southeast Asian Studies from the University of Hamburg, Germany. He also served as the elected faculty regent of the UP system. So another speaker this afternoon through video is Professor Emerita Merly Alunan. Uh, Professor Alunan was Professor Emerita upon her retirement at the University of the Philippines, Tacloban College. 4 of her books have won the National Book Award in 3 consecutive years. Her poems are collected in 5 volumes, including Hearthstone, Sacred Tree, Amina Among the Angels, Selected Poems, Tales of the Spider Woman, Pagdakop sa Bulalakaw, and Running with Ghosts. Dr. Mahar K. Mangahas is a Filipino economist who has done research on rice economics, land reform, poverty, hunger, income inequality, quality of life, governance, and public opinion. His education, he was educated rather in the Ateneo de Manila University, the University of the Philippines, and the University of Chicago, where he obtained his doctorate in economics. In 1985, he co-founded the Social Weather Stations, the Philippines' leading institute in quality of life monitoring, opinion polling, and survey archiving. He is currently chair emeritus. Assistant Professor Christine Lau teaches with the Department of English and Comparative Literature at UP Diliman, where she is currently finishing her PhD in creative writing. She has been published in numerous local and international publications, but we should note that her chapbook of short fiction, Musical Chairs, was a finalist in the 19th Madrigal Gonzalez First Book Award. Assistant Professor Lau is also a lawyer, and she has worked at the Supreme Court of the Philippines, other government and multilateral development institutions, and the law firm Sisip, Salazar, Hernandez, and Gatmaitan. Dr. Gisela Concepcion is a professor emerita of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and she is recognized for her contributions and research on marine natural products and drug discovery. Dr. Concepcion should be credited for her exploration of drug leads for the treatment of cancer, various infectious diseases, pain, and inflammation. She obtained her PhD in chemistry from the UP Diliman in 1995, graduating as the most outstanding PhD graduate. She began teaching postgraduate courses after this as faculty at the Marine Science Institute and affiliate faculty at the Institute of Chemistry. With her extensive experience, in 2011, she was invited to serve as the Vice President for Academic Affairs of the UP system. And finally, Mr. Ramil Gulye is the author of 4 books of poetry. His writing career spans journalism, public relations, marketing, biographies, and the literary arts. He is the founder of Healthy Mind Manila, a mental health support group on Facebook. And in 2018, he won the Poet of the Year prize at the Nick Joaquin Literary Awards. And in 2022, very recently, the Palanca Award for Poetry in English. And just so that you know, I am a teacher also at the Department of English and Comparative Literature. Thank you very much. So anyway, let us begin with our panel. This afternoon, we will begin with a video by Professor Emerita Merly Alunan. So let us pay attention and has to share with us.
May hapon gikan sa Tacloban. Maayong hapon sa mga kasangkayan, sa mga kaibigan. More than 30 years of teaching in areas of the country where poetry in any language is foreign speech. I learned the virtue of simplifying the reading process. I teach my students to think of the poem as human speech. One eases her way into the poem by thinking of it in terms of a basic communicative situation. The poem becomes easier to understand simply by knowing who is speaking, what circumstances provoked the speech, the attitude or mood of the speaker, and who the addressee or addressees might be. Thus, the poem on the page has to be read aloud, transmitted by the warm magic of the human voice, so that it becomes a speech we can listen to. Reading a poem is an exercise in active listening. By listening, we complete the communicative circle. We become sharers of the human condition that provoked the utterance to begin with. But I would also tell them that the reader is not always the addressee of a poetic speech, that in many instances, the reader may just be the third leg or the third ear, if you please, of a conversation, say, between lovers, and hence she's merely an eavesdropper, a marites who involves herself in an exchange that is really none of her business. Understanding the reader's position in the communicative process clears the ground for the interpretative process, clarifying how one or how the reader may respond to it. This is a bit more complicated, but let us defer the discussion to another occasion. Suffice it to say that faced with the 368 pages of Gemino Abad's poetry, I fall back on this simple wisdom to aid my adventure into his poetic world. To befriend the poems, I prepare then to listen. We ordinary mortals are instinctively skillful listeners. We have been practicing this skill all our lives as a matter of survival. By dint of practice and countless experiences, we have been taught to distinguish the accents of a yes that is actually yes, and a yes which might be a no in reality, or a no which may really mean no, or a possible yes if we had listened more intently. Being able to tell the difference by listening can spare one from a black eye or save one from a lifetime of heartache and loneliness. Listening is everyone's familiar ground, a life skill. It is a skill we may apply also to aid our entry into a poem's universe. Listening thus to Abad, I discover that the poet speaks mostly as himself in most of his poems. He dispenses with the invented mask of a persona or personae by which many poets accomplish their wizardry. Abad makes no commerce with subterfuge. The I or we in his poetry is no less than the poet himself. Right or wrong, that is how I choose, or that is how I chose to listen to his poems. He speaks to everyone except when he speaks to himself in introspection, or when he addresses the beloved, his children, his friends. Listening to Gemino Abad, one instantly feels herself in the presence of an astute, learned, courageous observer and interpreter of the scene, past, present, and to come. The poet has thought long and carefully about things and speaks with sincerity, courage, and honesty. Abad is a disciplined thinker and takes no shortcuts. He is never harried, nor does he hurry in laying out his thoughts. He lays them out carefully and thoroughly. He is consistently cerebral. He is never tempted to incivility or harshness. He is the true gentleman's gentleman in his verse. No matter how strongly he feels about certain situations, the cadence of his lines never falters. His voice never rasps. Never does he lose Never does he lose decorum, which is the overruling quality of his poetry. Yet, one cannot say that he is without passion, for his thoughts are fraught with intense but firmly reined conviction and faith. Of particular significance to me are his thoughts on language. Language is a fundamental concern of my own humble tillage in the field of Philippine writing. My Bisaya soul, fed from the dark loam of Balud and the sullen river of my childhood in Iloilo, the cane fields of Negros, and later the perpetually hungry village in Leyte, where I strayed and got stranded for good. My earliest communities were people with splayed toes from walking barefoot on muddy mountain roads and plodding along furrows of corn behind the hard-working Carabao. My early playmates were children of the agsadores who worked the cane fields of Victoria's Negros Occidental. The earliest stories I heard were told by women who knew not a word of English, my grandmother and my aunts. Educated in the public schools and growing up in rural Visayan communities, I did not take naturally to English. Much later, however, I wrote in English out of necessity. But all the while, even now, I am hungering for a language that is true to the lives of the people around me, lived as I perceive it in a language all their own. To this day, English has not lost its foreignness to me, though it may seem that I have made the colonizer's language my own, just as Abad advocates. Still, still, I feel I need to do more to reclaim the mother tongue, to make it mine again so I can write with authenticity about life in my islands. What pains the most is the knowledge that my own mother tongue, whatever remains of it after a peripatetic childhood, had also become foreign to me. Nor is Abad unaware of this loss. Neither is he indifferent to the dilemmas. But to him, the speech or speeches sprung of native soil are like bright flowers without stalk. Whereas I, on the other hand, continue to hope to regain the old languages. I still wish for them to come to life through my writing, whereas Abad sees the impossibility and the needlessness of such an endeavor. In the poem Quest 2, we hear these lines. All the languages of my archipelago lay claim to that other speech, which would unravel me and piece out my text. In that daylight babble, I cannot hope to found a country for my thought. All talk, their bright flowers without stalk. Their words merely invade me, and their terrain show their wounds. But the conqueror has long since gone. To none the spoils belong. In Going to America, he writes, we are a people without language yet. We speak, indeed, in sundry tongues, but find no communion. He has found for himself, and for those who accept his ideas, the means to stop our unraveling. In his introduction to the light in our blood, he asserts, truth seeking is our nature, our human essence. We want the facts. We look for meaning. We aspire to have a meaningful life. Abad affirms the primacy of the mind and the imagination, the will to order in the face of chaos and meaninglessness, the agency of language to shape the silence, willing existence with the word. Thus, when the mind loses a name, it loses a perception. The name is essential to its continence, or it wounds itself in the thing it does not respect. Or the thing whispers ex cathedra its theme. There, I suppose, lies the difference in our perspectives. For the native speech of my beloved Binisaya continues to speak to me. I founder on the knowledge that it is I who fails to talk back as I should. The mind thrills to the old names, but it fails somehow to make a home for itself in the language, despite its desire. Abad knows too well how history may be called to account for our losses, but he also sees among the wreckage of the past what we have gained in return. He takes refuge in the strength of the mind to find its way to our essential identity. As long as the mind is free and commands its memories, he asserts, we remain who we are, what we are. We can create the country of our hope from and in any language we choose. Language must work for, not against that essence. He iterates this over and over in this collection. The primacy of the mind and imagination, the will to order in the face of chaos and meaninglessness, the agency of language, the word that wills existence in the very act of naming, and thus gives silence a shape. So he writes, yet are we masters of all the languages that have formed us. But we remain faithful to ourselves, like the sea to its bars and strands. They shall be our servants still. Such confidence is won from a deep understanding of loss, I imagine. In the poem The Light in One's Blood, the poet states, Spain and America had invented our souls and wrought our land and history. He bluntly rejects the invention. I have not made nor accepted their words, My voice holds them at bay. It is important to seek silence, the void, rather than repeat or echo the words of the usurper. In the quest, we hear the poet say, O desolation of thought! Our words cannot echo its ghost, our own, but we have none. Their lives have been usurped, their words have gutted our sight and made our history. We have no tale except what they repeat. For the poet to speak true, he must seek a primal emptying in silence, a return to life's first flaring forth, that vast roar where stars shuddered to their birth, his words, and thus under the first, and thus utter the first word, the truth of being. In silence, the poet achieves the freedom of his mind, maintaining faith in sound that shaped all shapes, the cathedral of time, the ziggurat of space. There is no need to win back the native speech, to regain the ground lost to our colonial masters. There is primarily the mind to be won and memory to keep the truth safe. So, Abad does not save me from my word hunger. But then, as Abad also avers, every poet must find his own way through the labyrinth of one's history and the legacies it leaves us. I have to appease my own ghosts, contemplating with the poet the same country that we both have lost, and the same country and people we are seeking to name anew in poetry. Abad writes, we need another power to deflect their aim or master our own seeing. But that power isn't in any language except as we dream the words again. The power of any language lies not in itself, but in the dreamer, the silent worker who rearranges the inner ground beneath our dream, the mind, imagination, the light in our blood. If Abad's poetic persona abides as himself, he draws a character of prodigious intelligence, learned and inventive, and native of the universe of human thought, familiar with the peaks and troughs of history and culture. He is an adept in the uses of the word, the poet who seeks silence so he may name anew his country and his people who are deafened by the noises of its colonial past. Listen to Abad, spinning back to life the ancient allegories from the burdens of a sad archipelago in the throes of martial law. In the revenge of the parts of speech, he reveals the corruptive influence of power on language and thought, and how mind, logos, redeems speech with cleansing silence, so that things may reclaim their essence, turning lies into ashes that covered the earth, and birdsong becomes birdsong again without words. In the allegory, the poet's voice takes on the somber tone of mythography. It is not surprising that Abad's poetry resounds with a fabulist voice and is replete with their learning and their meaning. The same tyrants rise from their graves at every era. The same liars and thieves, though they may appear in new guises. Abad the Fabulist, makes history into myth, turning the temporal politics of the nation into the unending struggle against the annihilation of humanity that we read often in myth and fable. The king has no clothes, but his wife owns 3,000 pairs of shoes. The Google balloon of popular media, which sprouts from every person's mouth whenever he speaks and stays up in the air until it snuffs out the light. A boy's rare encounter with God as a dragonfly from the distant planet Andromeda. In these parables, Gemino Abad conjures the bedrock of faith that is humankind's defense against annihilation for ages and ages. When the poet on whom the Filipino from the poet on whom the Filipino nation have conferred the honor of national artist, we receive the powerful if pained assurance of our immutable humanity. We will survive our traitors. We will prevail despite the enemies hulking in our midst. The word will save us from the will of despots and thieves, but only if the mind and the imagination resist the lie, and only if our memories are clear and unbroken, despite oblivion and revisionist politics. The poet and his words will, for all generation, be the light in our blood. Matuman unta. Amen. Salamat mga kaigsuunan gikan sa Kabisayan. Salamat sa imong pagtuo, Gemino Abad. Maayong hapon usab kanatong tanan.
Ma'am Merly, kung naamoy pangutana for Ma'am Merly, naaman siya unya sa atong Zoom room, no? So if you have questions for Professor Alunan, you may want to ask them later because she will be available for questions at the Zoom room. So daghang salamat, Ma'am Merly. So karon dayon, we will have Dr. Ramon Guillermo, Sir Bomen, to speak about the poems of Dr. Abad. May I call on Sir Bomen to use the rostrum, or would you prefer to stay there? Okay.
Hello, magandang hapon at magbati sa ating mga tagapakinig, kay Sir Jimmy, sa ating mga kasama sa panel. At ayun, tutuloy ko lamang yung ating pagpapahalaga sa akda ni Sir Jimmy. At yun nga, masasabi ko na napaka-hard-hitting, nauna na sa akin magsalita si Merly, napakalalim at napakatalas nung kanya mga nasabi na. So siguro ito ay pandagdag na lamang doon sa ganong klaseng malalim na pagtalakay. So ito sa pagbabasa ng kanyang mga tula at prosa, kapansin-pansin ang katangian ni Professor Gemino Abad bilang isang makata na may hilig sa filosofiya. Kung tutuusin, hindi lamang siya may hilig, kundi nagpapakita ng malalim na kaalaman at sofistikasyon sa larangang ito. Sa ganang ito at inspirado ni Walter Benjamin, isang philosopher na German, nais kong tignan kung paano pinag-iisipan ni Jimmy ang usapin ng pagsasalin o translation sa kanyang mga tulang filosopikal at maging sa kanyang poetika. Mapapansin dito sa kanyang koleksyon na ilang beses niyang babanggitin na ang etimolohiya ng Ingles na translation ay mula sa Latin na translatus. Trans, ibig sabihin ibayo, latus, pagdala. Ibig sabihin nito ay kung gayon, pagdala sa ibayo ang translation. Na madalas ilarawan din ni Sir Jimmy sa kanyang aklat bilang isang ferry na tumatawid sa isang ilog isang maliit na bangka na tumatawid sa ilog. Ito ang proseso ng pagkasalin, pagtawid ng isang ilog. Alam nating lahat siyempre na nalikas na mahilig sa etymology si Professor Abad. No? Yan, so, ngayon naman, kung para lang ihambing natin, sa salitang German na may magandang essay tungkol dito si Walter Benjamin, ang pagkasalin ay Übersetzen, Übersetzen, na may literal na kahulugan na may inaangat, Über, yung over, may inaangat, at inilalagay, Setzen, sa kabila, marahil. Pag-aangat at paglalagay o paglilipat ng isang bagay ang matatawag nating literal na pakahulugan ng Übersetzen. Malinaw na makikita sa gayon, sa Latin at pati sa German, na ikinuturing na may agwat, guwang o pagitan na tinatawid ang bawat pagkasalin. Sa konbensyonal na pagkaunawa ng mga tagasalin, ang agwat na ito ay ang agwat sa pagitan ng dalawang wika. At masabi natin, may mga wika na talagang medyo magkalapit. May mga wika na talagang magkakalayo. May mga wika na napakalayo ng kanilang agwat sa isa't isa. Kaya halos maisip mong milagro ang pagkasalin sa pagitan ng dalawang wika na yon. Ang agwat na ito ay maaaring isang bangin na matarik o maaaring maging ilog na malalim at mapanganib. Sa kanyang mga sulatin, isinasaad ni Jimmy na ang gawain ng Makata ay isang walang katapusang pagsasalin. Isang walang katapusan. Ibig sabihin, ang gusto ko i-gate dito yung sentralidad ng pagsasalin sa pag-iisip ni Sir Jimmy tungkol sa pagtula. Para sa kanya, halos pareho, magkatumbas ang dalawang gawain na yon. Ngunit, may napaka-importanteng pagkakaiba. Ang pagsasalin sa kanyang pakahulugan ay hindi yung agwat pala, yung agwat na tinatawid ng bawat pagkasalin ay hindi ang agwat sa pagitan ng dalawang wika. Hindi yung agwat sa pagitan ng dalawang wika ang pinag-uusapan ni Sir Jimmy. Para kay Jimmy, ang pagsasalin na ginagawa ng mga Makata ay ang pagtatawid mula sa karnasang buhay ng Makata patungo sa mga anyong salita, sa ekspresyon, na ang tinatawid para makamit yon ay ang wika. So, kung ang sinasabi nating agwat sa karaniwang pag-iisip sa pagkasalin, yun yung agwat sa pagitan ng mga wika. Para sa kanya, yung pagitan mismo, ito ang wika. Ang tinatawid ng bawat Makata mula doon sa karnasan patungo sa pagsasaan yung salita ay mismong wika. Ito yung mapanganib na ilog na tinatawid ng bawat manunulat. Ito yung matarik na bangin, ang mismong wika. Hindi ang pagitan ng mga wika. So, ang wika ang mismong ilog o bangin na kinakailangang tawirin ng bawat Makata. Itinatawid ng Makata ang danas niya at ng kanyang komunidad. Mahalaga rito ang komunidad, para kay Sir Jimmy. Importante, babalikan natin yung hindi lamang danas niya, kundi ang danas ng kanyang komunidad. Ang mga sandali ng kanyang pag-iral, ang mga isip at damdamin sa ilog ng wika para magkaanyong salita ang mga ito bilang tula. Madiin si Professor Abad dito. Hindi magkatumbas ang wika at salita. Hindi magkatumbas ang wika at salita. Yung wika, yung naitawid na. Yung wika, yun yung ating tinatawid. Kaya magkaiba para sa kanya. Ang agwat na itinatawid ng pagkasalin ay hindi ang agwat sa pagitan ng mga wika, kundi ang agwat sa pagitan ng mga karnasan at ng salita na kinakatawan mismo ng wika. Nagaganap ang proseso ng pagkasalin na ito, alin pa mang wika ang ginagamit ng Makata. Sa gayon, ang bawat Makatang Pilipino na malalim ang pagdana sa mga karnasang buhay na Pilipino, sa pagkakahawig at pagkakaiba ng mga karnasang ito, ay tumatayong tagasalin ng karnasan na ito tungo sa pagsasaanyong salita, alin pa man ang kanyang wikang ginagamit. Mahalaga ritong idiin ang malinaw na paninindigan ni Jimmy sa lahat ng pagkakataon na siya ay isang Makatang Pilipino. Para sa kanya, Pare-pareho lamang ang mga bukal ng karanasan na pinagmumulan ng pagtula ng mga tinatawag na makatang Pilipino. Ang mga karanasan na ito ang kinakailangan nilang itawid, ang kanilang itinatawid at binibigyang anyo bilang mga tula. Maaring nagkakaiba-iba lamang ang mga makata sa pinagtatawiran nilang mga wika sa pagitan ng pambansang karanasan at ng pambansang tula o pambansang panitikan. Kung makatang Pilipino ang pag-uusapan, ang pangunahing usapin sa gayon ay ang husay niya sa pagkasali ng karnasang pambansa tungo sa pagpapahiwatig nito, ano paman ang wikang tinatawid niya upang makamit ang pagsasaanyong wika, ang pagsasaanyong salita. Ang isang paradoksikal na implikasyon nito ay may antas ng potensyal na pagkakatumbas ang lahat ng mga tulang Pilipino sa lahat ng ating mga wikang ginagamit, sapagkat iisang bukal lamang ng mga karnasang pambansa ang isinasalin o pinagsasalinan ng mga ito. At dahil iisa lamang ang kanilang pinagsasalinan, ay halos masasabi, paradoxical, masasabing salin din sila ng isa't isa sa isang mas mataas na abstraktong antas. No? So kumbaga, halos hindi mo na kailangang isalin ang mga tula ni Jimmy Abad. Dahil kung talagang malalim ang kanilang pag-ungkat sa karanasan ng Pilipino, ang iba pang mga tulang nakasulat sa Pilipino, de facto ay mga salin na ng mga tula ni Jimmy Abad. From the beginning, all of these approach some kind of convergence, in fact, some kind of translational equivalence on a higher plane. May mga kapanahon si Professor Abad na makatang Pilipino tulad niya, na piniling tawirin ang mga ilog na Filipino, Ilocano, Cebuano at iba pa. May mga magaling din na makata na lumipat mula sa ilog na Ingles patungo sa Filipino, katulad ng aking ama. May mga makata naman na maraming ilog ang tinatawid ng sabay-sabay. May mga ganyan, no? Ang pinili ni Jimmy na tawirin ay ang ilog ng Ingles. Sa pagtawid niyang ito, ipinapalagay kong hindi lamang niya sinisikap itawid ang mga karnasang pambansa patungo sa salita. Sinisikap din niyang itawid sa kabilang ibayo, sa ating ibayo muli, pati ang mismong wikang Ingles. Ang mismong wikang Ingles ay ang itinatawid niya patungo sa atin, sa kanyang pagkasalin. Yan. So maraming salamat. Ayun lang naman.
Maraming salamat, Sir Bomen. Sa tungkol sa mga tula ni Dr. Abad, no? In Fugitive Emphasis, she wrote an afterword and then she calls the poems of Sir Jimmy Sursum Corda, pag-aangat ng puso. So parang tinatawid ang puso, hindi lang ang salita, hindi lang ang karanasan, kundi ang puso. So anyway, we will now call on our third panelist, Dr. Mahar Mangahas. Sir, would you like to speak from where you are or would you like to use the rostrum? Okay.
Maraming salamat. Thanks very, very much. I find this a very, very unusual event for me. And I think, well, my explanation for being here is that I am probably the oldest victim of Jimmy Abad's poetry in this entire room. You know, he has been befuddling and bewildering me for more than 50 years. Even from being, sharing, well, not really sharing, but spending time in his room, in his dorm room in Chicago, at the University of Chicago. Okay, so don't ask me to explain anything he says, right? I'll just give you some background. I'm old enough to have been a student of Miss Daduvalsa, for example, one of my favorite teachers. Jimmy was, let me say immediately, Jimmy and his wife Mercy, who is a market researcher, are two of the co-founders of Social Weather Stations itself. You know, we are 7, and they are 2 of them. And I guess Jimmy could understand what we wrote because he edited for publication our book, Measuring Philippine Development. So I guess we passed your standards, Jimmy. Thank you there. As an academic, by the way, let me emphasize that there is no "the" before social weather stations. There is no "the." It is only social weather stations. It has always been like that. Just like you never say "the" before Leol Heights or Beverly Hills, if you know better. But too many people don't know better. So it's SWS, there's no "the." Unless you want to say "the one and only," but we don't do that, right? I'm sure there is a lot of meaning in Jimmy Abad's work because others can see it, even if I can't see it, all right? That's my fault. But it's there. In fact, I remember in your 75th birthday festschrift that Krip Yuson read your poems. And I found, my gosh, I can understand now what he's trying to say because Krip's reading from his. But that's also because Krip knew what he was reading. Because when I read, it comes out different somehow. I have put my, okay, good, they're there. I have put my talking points there. So my first point is what I've been saying. It's Jimmy Abad's revenge for all of these years that I've been complaining that, Jimmy, I don't know what you said. I think you were predicting the future when you gave me a poem and you said, this is for you, and it had to do with a groundhog peeping out of his burrow, trying to determine if winter is coming to an end already. Do you remember that? Well, Mao's Garden is the title that. It features a groundhog who's trying to predict the weather. And I thought, this is many years ago. My gosh, I am in this occupation somehow that Jimmy predicted for me long, long ago. I'm his groundhog. Now let me go to this issue of language. We are using all of us, your English. There are many Englishes, you know that. No? And I'm glad I have read you using it in a plural form. And we have our own, I think, Diliman English. Even the way we speak, probably. I mean, you could have a Henry Higgins here who could tell you where you come from, depending on how you speak. A few months ago, I asked Butch Dalisay where he came from because his English is different. And he said, LaSalle. LaSalle. Okay. I'm partly Ateneo, but I don't think I speak Ateneo. I think I speak more Diliman English. Right. So there are all of these things there. And for me, we just muddle through. We just do what we do. No? In it. Whatever we use, that's it. What did he say? That's the one thing I have to write it down, or else I'll forget. One speaks and language comes. You open your mouth and you don't know what will come out. Huh? Whatever comes out is the language. Okay? The light in one's blood. So, may ilaw pala ang dugo. I mean, all of those images are what will get you going first. Huh? May ilaw pala ang dugo. Right. Maybe I'll go to number 3 already. Oops, no, don't move that. Don't move that. That's later. Those are the examples. I just would like to emphasize that in survey research, language is extremely important. It's how you get information from the people that you interview. You have to use some kind of language. Right? When we do a national survey, we use at least 5 languages, all written form. I'm not counting English, which is the Tagalog, or Filipino, Ilocano, Bicol, Cebuano. That 5 already? In Mindanao, they are mostly using Cebuano. And we just make dagdag whenever we need it. Ilonggo, and all the languages spoken by the Muslims in Mindanao, of which there are at least 4 languages. Right? Those are all important. They have to be written down. You cannot, there's no ad-lib allowed in survey work. It's got to be read word for word. Interviewers are trained not to fool around with the words. You can't change a single word. Right? We are members of the, we as WS are members of the International Social Survey Program. That's now a grouping of about 40 countries. And actually the first meeting we attended had Jimmy and Mercy in it, remember, in Graz. Austria. You remember that? Okay. Well, Mercy was an official delegate, you were not. Okay. In ISSP, that's its initial, in ISSP, the official language is British English. We've all agreed on that. That's the primary language in which the questionnaire is written, because we pledge that we're going to do the same survey in all our countries, specifically for comparison. But of course, we will make translations. We'll do our own translations. But it's British English that we use. So there's American, English, the Filipino English, etc., etc., etc. But not a single word of the British English must be changed. And then when we do our own version, not a single word must be changed also. And all the versions are on file in the archive. That has to be done. Right? It's extremely, extremely important never to change. Okay, now let me go to the third one where I have words and numbers in survey research. Numbers are also words, by the way. So let's go to the first example. This is, to me, our primary survey question. This question involves the interviewer reading a card. And the interviewer says, saan po ninyo ilalagay ang inyong pamilya sa card na ito? The card has, as you can see, it says, hindi mahirap, and it says mahirap. But the interviewer doesn't even read those words. It just says, basahin ninyo. Saan kayo sa card na ito? And lo and behold, from the very first time we tried this out, we got 3 answers. Some point to one side, some point to the other side, and some point to the line. The line is not a word, but they point to the line. Right now, there are about 50% who say mahirap, and there are about 30% on the line, and only 20% who say hindi mahirap. That line is a very meaningful line. We don't even say may line. Basta't nakikita nila that there's a line. That's part of the language, the line. Everything, even a picture, is part of the language. Next slide, please. Now, this is the most common numerical question. This is used in the service of happiness. Imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. The top is the best possible life for you, and the bottom is the worst possible life for you. On which step of the ladder would you personally feel you stand at this time? That's an 11-point scale, because it starts with a 0 up to 10. Right? Common Filipino answer about 6. Champions answers mga 7, 7.5. Yung mga Scandinavians. Okay. Very, very poor Africans about 3 or 4. Okay. But here's another one. Next. Look at this. In the scale above, +5 represents the best time you ever had in your life. -5 is the worst time you ever had in your life. And the others are between your best and your worst times. Using this scale, how did you feel in the last 2 weeks? This is called ACSA, Anamnestic Comparative Self-Assessment. So the issue here now, and this is new, we are doing this. Try to remember your best and your worst. Actually, not what you think could be your best and what you think could be your worst, which is the ladder scale. The ladder scale is in the imagination. This one is in the here and now. Kung anong naranasan ninyo na. Okay. This scale was invented by an oncologist who works with cancer patients, many of whom are dying, actually. And we are one of the few countries that's trying this out also. Okay, so that's ACSA. That's also language, by the way. And now lastly, I want to tell you that we have poetry in SWS2. I ask that this be distributed because it will take somewhat a long time, but to read. But this we heard in the office about a week and a half ago. Only because in the office once a week, somebody gives a reflection. The one who gives a reflection is chosen at random. And we go through the whole staff, everybody. And this is a field interviewer, Lou Kabobongan, who wrote about her experience in Tawi-Tawi. We didn't say write a poem, we just said make a reflection. And she wrote a poem, and I won't read it because there are other things I want to read. But I want to say that when somebody wants to give a reflection on a poem, we say, well, that's nice, you know. And it's not the first time that it has happened. Now, lastly, I want to show you our hymn. This is the SWS hymn. This is the combination of poetry by the late Vladimir Ligodine, who died last week. You know him. You must know him, Jimmy. And Kari Jane Dayag Lilo. Actually, his funeral was yesterday. It's so sad he was buried in Bulacan. So this is our hymn which we sing once a week on Zoom. And if you'll pardon me, I'll read it to you. Samot-saring pananaw, aming binibigyang linaw. Isyung makabuluhan, una sa aming listahan. Hustisya't edukasyon, kalikasan, at eleksyon. Maging ang paksa sa politika at ekonomiya. Lahat tinatala, bawat opinyon ng madla. Nang sa gayon ay malaman ang hinaing ng mamamayan. Yan ang aming hangarin. Demokrasya'y pagtibayin. Instrumento ng masa sa kanilang karaingan. SWS ay tinatag layon nitong magampanan na ang bayay magising sa katotohanan. Gentlemen, Jimmy Abad is one of our co-founders and I think we are trying to do him justice. Maraming po salamat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mangahas. It's very interesting that even with such precise and the attempts for accuracy in their work and the role of numbers, it's still a getting to know the other, getting to know and a crossing through words that they're doing, even in a different way. Yeah, so thank you very much. Okay, so now we will listen to our fourth speaker, Dr. Gisela P. Concepcion. Dr. Concepcion, we will watch the video with Dr. Concepcion's remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. Aloneness and melancholy. Dearest Jimmy, artist of our nation, I trust you are well in your life chosen to be alone, even as you are surrounded by kindest, most consoling heart of mercy. I thank you and my loved Miss Dadufalsa for the life of the mind, which I found in the university from the time we first met when I was 16 until today, over 5 decades now. I too am mostly alone when dwelling in my mind on compelling questions of human existence, our progression and regression, and that of the rest of nature. Your poetics have an air of cold, distant melancholy, as would be from the mind of a solitary master working, keeping your distance, I imagine, often quite sad and lonely, taking sole responsibility to perfect the craft of the word, driven to articulate a vantage viewpoint of the rich and complex world within and outside you. I can imagine, too, the pangs and pains of creation, the birth of a poem, and the rapture that ensues. The mind of your eye is sharp and vivid, telling that you blend your mind and senses as a prescient philosopher would, with knowledge captured and consumed greater than a scientist, seemingly present as witness at God's inception of the evolution of the grand universe in our humble world, deciphering his design, you are his heralder. Tragique and magnifique. Dadufalsa would tell me, I am so young, yet so tragique. More so you, Jimmy, you know the underlying truth about our small, gentle tragedies. And for that, Je t'adore, I adore you, though it might as well be as your imp of ear hears, shut the door, gently, sometimes, Jimmy. Please do not keep thinking our tragedy, as you overwhelm us, can overpower us, with your imagery and imagination of it, come alive in endless strings of thoughts and words, quite often eluding my deciphering. What I feel is guilt, regret, at not having understood you more, even if I read you at every stage of my life. For this talk, I read through most of the book. Fantastic Ganglion for Giselle is still enigmatically unfolding to me after 50 years. Jimmy, exactly what do you mean? If I understood you better, I might have lived my life differently. I know my tragique is the dimension of time which passes our moments and one day dies on us. The imperfection of time, when all our personal and collective moments and lifetimes end. Fantastic Ganglion knows death's tolling with finality is inevitable, and I am preparing for it. But there lies our saving grace that our FG, Fantastic Ganglion Jimmy, writes prolifically, naturally, as a matter of his course, for posterity, and as a great lover does, captures meticulous detail of things and processes, animate and inanimate, long bygone and here and now, infinite and infinitesimal, important and mundane. Your mind's perceivings, imaginings, ponderings in total weave a rich tapestry of your world that you draw from. Insight, hindsight, foresight, for most valuable learnings for all of humanity. A guide from becoming better, transcendent persons and societies. Your language, most quietly elegant and gently rhythmic, with cadence and with modest cheer and Saleb's ecstasy. You are documenter of the world's grandeur. And we stand and sing, C'est magnifique. When a chance for progress, renewal, and revival arises, and when love returns. And this is what overcomes death, the collective continuity of life and love, through our cumulative writings, our teachings, and mentoring of the next generation, which makes us immortal and builders of, contributors to human cultures and civilizations. Form and substance in other art forms, science, and social politics. And what else is there in the vast realm of human knowledge with which to build cultures and civilizations? Aside from language, literary art, and discourse, there are other art forms, and there is science and social politics and their structures, each with its unique forms and methods of expression of their content and substance. In art and science, we seek truth, though we never attain the whole of it. In art and science, we use our mind and imagination, with language as memory. We also need to use our senses and our hands and their extensions, such as instruments. In all, mens et manus for veritas. I have witnessed Jimmy enjoying light moments in the midst of women's shrieks and chatter and dancing to loud music. He is tolerant and forgiving of these, though one cannot escape noticing his faraway look with a smile, telling me he is trying to make sense of the nonsense of his socialization, likely he's conjuring a new poem in his head. I have enjoyed listening to Jimmy deliver a tour de force of his poems. Also, I've heard him evangelize to us about the value of general education. I would say hearing him speak and proclaim with passion makes a big difference. And how many of us have admired the intricate calligraphic handwriting of his poems, accompanied by his art drawings? Jimmy is a consummate artist of many forms. When I see the imagery of humans and nature in his poems, I think of the visual art of the modernists, Picasso, Klee, Miro, and Dali. Some elements and processes are disjointed, presented not as accurately and completely as they occur visually in nature, the way I would observe it as a scientist. Is art there to strip essentials of peripherals and make the visible intriguingly invisible? As science yearns to unravel the deep mysteries of nature and make the invisible clearly visible. Indeed, art and science provide us valuable learnings and viewpoints in complementary ways. I have spent my entire scientific life trying to uncover and understand some molecular, cellular, organismic, and ecological secrets of nature, I wanted to study the invisible to make them visible. As if fulfilling a prophecy in fantastic ganglion, Giselle's science led her to work with fantastic dorsal root ganglions, or DRGs, to discover new molecules from nature found in marine gastropod snails with gills, a foot, and a mantle, not quite so desolate, left behind by tens of millions of years, not a few centuries, because we explored and found them. To what end and for what purpose? Some molecules to target vanillin V1 molecular receptors to alleviate intractable neuropathic or cancer pain generated in peripheral nerves such as the DRGs, and other molecules to target nicotinic receptors to stimulate nerve impulses in the brain, in the central nervous system, something that is safe and acts like Jimmy's nicotine in smoke, which sparks and quickens his thoughts. It looks like Jimmy the poet and Giselle the scientist, both fascinated with nature and evolutionary biology, have tread divergent paths, but they cross and converge on each other too. There is an important language that led me to the path of science. That is mathematics, which is the handmaid of science. Numeracy is just as important as literacy. All of nature processes its various chemical materials and forms of energy in the biosphere, geosphere, and aerosphere in quantitative doses, and scientists need to understand this well. And so all of science makes use of quantitative measurements to produce good, reliable data and results as basis for conclusions and applications. At present, there is a fast-growing impact on society and polity of the language of mathematics, which has now evolved to data science, digitalization, neural networks, deep machine learning, and artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is patterned after the human brain and mimics the function of neural networks in ganglions to undertake thought processes. Rational thinking is linked to language, which is even easier to mimic and automate than thinking. What remains then is AI mimicking imagination and imagery, which are closely linked to emotion, and that isn't far from becoming reality in AI. Words, language, poetry, literary and other art forms as memories of the workings of mind and imagination continue to shape society. The same it is with science and mathematics, and the nascent automated thought and memory technologies that are now upon us, posing great risk of socio-economic, cultural, and political control of societies. How then do we ensure that we continue to build good cultures and civilizations on Earth? We know all tools and methods of communication and interaction provided by art and science are double-edged. Thus, we should bring strong mentoring programs on good ethics and values in universities to guide the next generation of youth leaders in the use of language, the arts, science, and technology. Light in one's blood as ethics. The prescient ethics of national artist Gemino manifests in the title of the book. There is indeed red light in one's blood that keeps us alive. Iron in hemoglobin makes our blood red. Blood that flows keeps cells alive and tissues or organs and organ systems functioning. Hemoglobin with iron binds the oxygen that we breathe and delivers it to cells to oxidize food to produce energy. One might consider this to be another light or electron transition event. And it also ferries carbon dioxide out of the body. Blood makes possible the ethical, balanced allocation and distribution of resources needed by the community of tissues and organs in the body. In fact, studies exist on biochemical regulation of resources as a model for social and market communities. In other life forms, it could be a different color in blood or a flickering bioluminescence or phosphorescence in fluids, which serves as signals important for the organism's success and survival. I would say, where there is light, there is life. This ends my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Concepcion. Just like Ma'am Merly, Dr. Concepcion will be available for questions and comments in our Zoom room. So if you have questions for her, please make sure to mention them later. I noticed some people taking photographs of our event today. Kindly use our hashtags, hashtag 13th 13THIBF, hashtag Gemino Abad, capital G, capital A, and hashtag the light in one's blood, capital T, capital L, capital I, capital O, and capital B. Okay. Of course, you can also use the hashtags poetryph and hashtag literatureph. So now we will have Assistant Professor Christine Lau. So Tin.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you to Likhaan for inviting me to speak on Sir Jimmy's book, The Light in One's Blood. No, it's a retrospective, a 50-year retrospective of his work. And it is something that I found very relevant to my own research. I'm currently finishing a dissertation on law and poetry. And Sir Jimmy's body of work, I figured out pretty early on, was such that he would tackle the law in his poems. He was one of the people that was relevant to me. I needed to know what he was saying about that. And so when the book came out, I immediately got a copy and for my own research. And so when I received the Likhaan's invitation, ICW's invitation to speak, I was very happy and ready to speak about law. Except that when the materials came out, I found out that I was here to speak about the discipline, the academic discipline where I work now. Because even though I practiced as a lawyer for almost 20 years, in the end, I left it to teach and to write. Okay, so you might say that the concept of the light in one's blood, no, a kind of desire that calls you to work the word, as Sir Jimmy said, so that you may get meaning, no? You may get some kind of meaning from your life in the form of that word, was something that I desired. Notwithstanding that, as a lawyer, I traded in words every day, right? But in a different sort of fashion. Okay? And there was this desire, I suppose, that animated ultimately the decision to explore further, to inquire what it is that poetry can do that law and its language can't. But because I am here to represent creative writing as a discipline in the department where Sir Jimmy has taught, Sir Jimmy was my teacher, a very demanding but gentle teacher, okay, whom I learned from so very much. A very encouraging teacher. I prepared something to read because of his care for words. The accuracy with which he models to demonstrate in his own writing and lectures. And I would also like to start with poetics, no? An important requirement in our field of study sa creative writing. Meron po ba ditong creative writing major? Yay! Represent! Thank you. Malikhaing pagsulat, meron po ba? Ayan, meron din. So, hindi sa atin foreign yung konsepto ng poetics essay, di ba? So, pagbigyan nyo na muna ako kasi hindi ko alam kung sino yung kausap ko eh. At meron ako ritong iilang salita tungkol sa poetics, no? Okay, here I start out with a few pictures of activities that our department has held in honor of Sir Jim. We have been co-sponsoring with the OVPAA the Gemino Abad Literary Award for poetry, diba? And criticism. Sir Jim was my teacher both in poetry and literary criticism. So the last one he had was pre-pandemic in 2019, and we hope that one of these days we'll revive it again. And the second is during the pandemic, our department, and before Sir Jimmy was appointed awarded national artist, we actually came out with a retrospective of Sir Jimmy's chosen works, together with the works of the winners of this particular competition, and a few others who have spoken about Sir Jimmy, his criticism, and his poetry. So please, you can check these things out. They are available online. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So let us start with poetics. Okay. From the standpoint of creative writing studies, I was particularly interested in the fact that The Light in Our Blood includes towards the end of the book a statement of poetics entitled Mind, Language, and Literary Work, Apoetics. So I suppose for those of us who feel that, the poetics is something difficult to do, a distraction, I see people saying yes, a distraction from the creative work. Here we have an example of what exactly the poetics can do for us as readers and writers. Now, the poetics essay plays an important role in creative writing pedagogy. Like other academic disciplines, creative writing is envisaged as a process of inquiring and exploring a question. In addition to the creative work that is produced as part of this inquiry process, students are expected to generate new knowledge by writing the poetics essay, a text that articulates the relationship between critical and theoretical inputs, reading, and writing the creative work. Now, pwede ba maging isang manunulat na hindi naman gumagawa ng poetics essay? Pwede naman, di ba? Pwede. Pero in creative writing studies as an academic discipline, nakita na ang pananaw ay importante itong essay na to dahil meron siyang ginagawa, meron siyang epekto sa paraan ng pagsusulat natin, sa mga choices natin kung bakit natin sinusulat ang ating mga sinusulat sa paraan na sinusulat natin siya. So, with that in mind, there has been, however, an observation globally in other schools, okay, not just where I teach, that many students struggle with completing the poetics essay. Some feel paralyzed by doing critical work alongside the creative, and others have actually expressed the view that critical reflection is valuable only because it can show an ability to do theory and teach not just writing, but literary and cultural studies as well. Now, Dr. Abad's poetics, at the end of his book, challenges these views. Okay, next slide po. The essay Mind, Language, and the Literary Work lays out the philosophical underpinnings of Sir Jimmy's writing practice and output, thereby revealing how poetic practice, generally thought to be an expressive activity, is, for Sir Jim, more than simply expression. It is also a form of thinking. Now, the title of the essay alone suggests that his poetry is the outcome of a sustained and thoughtful participation in some of the most contentious philosophical debates waged in and about the post-colonial imaginary of the Philippine nation, its language, national language, and literature. All these debates happening during the period covered by the book and engaged in by the milieu in which Sir Jimmy found himself teaching and writing. The thinking in the essay is so closely entwined with his poems that one meets in the essay some of the most memorable and thought-provoking phrases and lines from his poems. Next slide, please. So these are some of those lines that you can see both in the essay and his poems. And if you look at them, they already mean something. They sort of activate in us some kind of desiring, diba? Some kind of feeling. Especially for those of us who are engaged, diba? In the task of writing seriously, diba? Trying to write, trying to work the language. Dr. Abad's poetics proceeds from epistemology rather than from metaphysics. That means it proceeds from assumptions that answer the question what we can know rather than what is. This is why he emphasizes that none of us have a direct knowledge of absolute concepts such as truth, reality, justice, or love. He does not say, by saying this, he does not mean that truth, justice, etc. do not exist. They do. They continually attract us to know what they are. But we cannot say that when we use these words to make our meaning known, that our meanings are the only meanings that exist. The words that we use for these abstractions only reflect the limits of our knowledge, perception, and experience. What we claim to know through experience and the work of imagination all takes the form of words. Words that are, as Sir Bowman discussed earlier, capable of varying meaning, but which are in themselves empty. Empty in the sense that it is not the word, but lives lived in given historical time and culture, according to Sir Jim, that is the word of the word's meaning. Take, for example, the word nation, a word in English that Dr. Abad describes as a legal fiction. A law student, meron ba ditong mag-enroll sa law school? May balak mag-law school? Wala, writers lang. O meron, no? Guilty. Okay lang yan. Go, di ba? Yun. So, a law student, sasabihin ko lang sa inyo, studying the 1987 Constitution, might understand nation to mean the Philippine state, and continue reading further without inquiring into what else the word might mean or stand for outside of the legal text. Now, despite the central place that the Philippine nation occupies in his thinking, Dr. Abad uses not nation, but country to refer to the Philippines in his poetry. Tulad nga ng nabanggit kanina ng ating mga speakers, mahalaga kay Sir Jim yung etymology, mahalaga ang salita, diction. And so, nung nakita ko na ang tendency ni Sir Jim ay paggamit ng country at hindi nation, napatanong ako, bakit kaya? This is particularly interesting given that Sir Jim himself says that when he uses the word country, it means a national community born from the memory of a shared past and a common history. A definition that aligns with Benedict Anderson's concept of nation as imagined community. But unlike this concept, the word country connotes an actual place, the occupation of a particular territory in the world. It is a place that holds a people together, not merely the imagination. Next slide po. Place is integral to Dr. Abad. 3 of his anthologies of poetry, Filipino poetry in English suggest this. Makikita natin sa title, Man of Earth, Native Clearing, Habit of Shores. Mga lugar, di ba? What we need, he insists, and this another title of an anthology, is to stand upon our own ground. This insistence on the primacy of place has to do with the Philippines' colonial past. Historically, what united us was not our contiguous existence, our shared interaction in space, but empire. Elsewhere, Sir Jim observes that the earliest Filipino Anglophone writers writing in the language of the ruling colonial power would include elements from the Philippine environment in their texts such as a Maya, but use this instead of the usual trope in the Western canon, a nightingale. This is not what he thinks Philippine literature is. Okay? Sir Jim is interested in how writers use a language thoughtfully to express a Philippine sensibility. It does not matter which language a writer chooses or uses, he says, provided that it is worked through to mimic, represent, and express what the writer or what we have perceived, intuited, and felt living life in the Philippines. A writer who has mastered the language will, he believes, be able to achieve a compelling representation of this experience and what he has intuited using the elements and affordances of that language. The significance of this position on language becomes especially evident when one considers it in the light of other writers' views. For example, some writers have chosen to write only in English. Nabanggit din to ni Sir Bowman kanina, framing this as necessary in the service of their craft. Others have chosen otherwise. First writing in English, they have decided to switch to write completely in Filipino. With regard to English, since Philippine literature in the post-war was predominantly written in English, the attention to craft as the primary aspect emphasized in the way creative writing is taught gave rise to a tendency to conflate Philippine literature with writing by Filipinos in English, thereby maintaining the superiority of that language over local languages and reifying its position as the marker of class and cultural sophistication. The thing is, even poets who chose to write exclusively in English observed and worried about the fact that Philippine poetry in English was more ivory tower than it should be. A kind of poetry that felt safer dealing with the inner man rather than the pain that is felt in the national marrow. For this reason, writers argued about what Philippine literature was or should be in terms of language. Writing in English was thought of as being unable to engage with the Philippine experience. The language debate in literature became entwined with a debate between art for art's sake and socially committed literature. And so, some writers eventually chose to write completely in one language, and others remained certainly writing in English. In the meantime, literatures in other Filipino languages flourished, apart from the canonized Philippine literature in English. So English, in this respect, and the way that it was seen or treated in the discussions involving literature and language, served to divide rather than to unite. Writers, people. So in contrast to all of this, Sir Jimmy claims that a Filipino writer's mother tongue is all the world's languages, a point that Ma'am Burley takes issue with. Okay. For Sir Jim, all languages, all media for communication and expression are our mother tongue. Rather than prescribe writing a national language, yet another empty concept backed by law, he wagers that the mastery of a language, the thoughtful practice of applying all of that language's resources to ferry what it's like to live in the Philippines is what makes for good literature, one that can engage with the social and political even when it is written in English. Now, it bears recalling at this point that Sir Jimmy's position is that words are not the source of a poet's meaning. It's the poet's lived experience. And what the poet accomplishes by working a language, any language, is to produce a conceptual representation of what we know as a body grounded in this place now. This stance, maybe next slide, okay? I think I'm several slides ahead. Next slide, please. Okay. This stance is what enables Sir Jimmy to say that it is possible to write socially committed poems in English, poems that engage not only the personal, but the political. The Light in One's Blood has a section on country, which begins with two poems that seek to bring this concept to life. Rather than provide conceptual definitions of country na kayang-kaya naman ni Sir Jimmy, he instead asks a reader to consider the jeepney. Honestly, this piece of storm in our city's entrails, incarnation of scrap, what genius of salvage, what art or craft, what cunning. Its crib now molds our space, its lusty gewgaws our sight. The comparison in line 2 brings to mind the idea of the idea and image of a noisy jeepney disturbing a quiet road. At the same time, it grounds the jeepney in the particulars of a place and time. It brings it into monsoon season, the narrow streets crowded with people, choked up with traffic. And the fourth and fifth lines call to mind not just the metal sheen of the jeepney, but its origins too. The jeepney, post-war alteration of American troop jeeps, like the Philippines, though recognized post-war, still a country that was in the worst of times, making do what it had. Next slide, please. The next poem, Tricycle, consists of words that mimic the cacophony produced by the tricycles plying our streets, even as they ignite memories of our own encounters with tricycles. Obstreperous insect of daring do, its scabrous sidecar fretful dreadnought on threadbare wheels and wrapped in scraps of tin and thatched with ads. The predominance of the R sounds here, interspersed with the S's, the slippery S's, brings to life the sound of a motorcycle motor, and the way it slips and slides through streets. These lines don't function the way Anderson's definition of nation as imagined community does. They don't define nation or country so much as imagine it, providing words that allow us to imagine how this nation, this country feels like by calling to mind our lived experience. To conclude, I'd like to share a few thoughts about the law and poetry. Yes, time's up. Pasensya na po. The law does not fare well in Sir Jimmy's poems. Next slide po. In his conceptual representation of Philippine life, the law is represented as a field and a language of pure abstraction. In the poem Grave Thief, for example, written in reaction to the government's decision upheld by the Supreme Court to grant former President Marcos a hero's burial, Dr. Abad directs the court to behold your legal gobbledygook, triumph of the law's dead alphabet. See your supermoon landscape bereft of legal meaning. The law is empty because it does not speak the people's meaning. It is separate from the life world. But has the law ever done this? We are, Sir Jim concludes, the spirit in our Constitution, but the Constitution itself is a legal fiction, the conceptual embodiment of a people's will, a concept we take for granted and accept in daily life without thinking deeply about what it stands for and what it actually does. Legal fictions, Abad suggests, operate to constrain and therefore, again, divide. The problem is that the language of the law, its reliance on logic, its fine distinctions and technicalities mystify us, unschooled in the language, barring us from speaking back and even inquiring into what the words of this language means. And even as the law's language admits of no connection to the people's life world, our mystified silence results in the law speaking us, its declarations creating the legal fictions of order and unity. So yan lang po. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Tin, for your uh, um, elaboration on, especially on the idea of the value of the poetics for a writer. Usually, these kinds of essays are unpleasant to write, but definitely they really help the writer to know what one is doing. No? And I think Dr. Abad gives us a good example of a poetics essay. Okay, so right now we will have our last panelist, and then after this, we will have our open forum. Okay, so Sir Ramil, would you like to begin?
I'll just stay here. Good afternoon. Um, I turned 50 years old in April, so I'm glad that I'm as old as the books, as the poems gathered in this volume. Um, I'm a Thomasian, and I got to know Sir Jimmy through workshops. I was also a fellow, 1994, I think, at the UP National Writers Workshop, where I now realized Sir Jimmy's chief influence on my poetics, on my writing as a poet, really from 1991 till 1998 maybe, really did not come from his poems, but from his lectures and his essays, because these were the books authored by him that I had. Because at that time, wala pang online shopping, it was so hard to get hold of the books of poetry of the poets that you like. And but then the influence was there, and although I decided not to show you like how this influence had happened because it would take too long. What I found really important, at least I'm concerned about young people and young writers and students, for students and young writers to know, is that poetry is not something that's only for certain types of people. And the style, let's say, that Sir Jimmy writes with can somehow be can give that impression, because as Professor Alunan said earlier, his writing style as a poet comes off as cerebral, as formal, as classic. And this is something that, because I'm raising teenagers, this is something that I get conscious about, because if you notice how young people have been ruined in a way by social media, by Facebook, if you notice, these are all US entities. So the destruction of our spirit and our mind continues through social media. But I also had that same impression when I was young. And I was wrong, because the style is not really what makes the poet. It's really, as Sir Jimmy would mention in his poems and his lectures, it's not the language really, but it's what's behind the language. It's the imagination where the language comes from. And I note that the definition of nation and country were mentioned, and I would posit that our real country, the real country of Filipinos, is not an actual physical place. Because how many Filipinos are scattered all over the world, yet remain quite devoted to being Filipino, remain passionate about their being Filipinos. So I would posit that the real country of Filipinos, again, is the country that we imagine. The country that has been shaped within and by our experience in our imaginations growing up. And this is also why, if we look at the poem, The Light in One's Blood, to me, a writer who writes a poem like this is really a national poet, a national artist, because to me, that's what being a national artist is. It's his art bringing our imaginations in our hearts, in our concerns to matters that affect the entire nation, the entire country of our imaginations. And so when Sir Jimmy writes, can I get could you have the slide, the third slide, I think. When he writes to seek our way of thinking by which our country is found, I know but do not know, for its language is lost. Here, I read the poem as a lament and as a pinpointing of where our current woes really came from. Could we go to the next slide, please? Our language is lost. Therefore, our identity is lost. We have been dispossessed of our native culture by our colonizers, by our conquerors. That is exactly the source of the present trauma that we all have. And this is a trauma that those from my generation and from the generation today, that's where our traumas come from. Spain and America had invented our souls. To invent means the real one, the original one, had been disposed of and has been replaced. And in effect, they have also wrought our land and our history. And that is our tragedy, really. This is the real damage that colonialism has done to us and so many other peoples. And this is something that you have to be aware of as young people. Do not be passive and allow the continuing destruction of your native ground, of your native clearing, as Sir Jimmy had phrased it in his other work. Next slide, please. Here, we are given not a solution, but we are being pointed in a direction. How do we heal this trauma and how do we move forward from it? The same words, but not the given, for void its speech of empire. Our eyes must claim their right to our landscape and its names. We must ever fall from our own sky to find our earth again. We are being compared in a way to seeds. The seed dies. Only when the seed dies can new growth begin. And from that new growth, a forest grows. This is how we heal from our trauma. What the poet does is not really offer specific national programs, education programs, but rather the insight into what we must experience as a sort of death and acceptance of what was, what damage was done, and then growing from out of that. It's a very lovely image to fall from our own sky, which is perhaps the sky of our imagination, the sky of our hopes, and then to fall within our own earth and grow from there. Next slide, please. Now, another poem that struck me when I was reading the book was this, because of course I went through many years of Catholic schooling, and the monk Joseph of Cupertino was one of the stories we discussed in religion class. So just to summarize what the story is about, Giuseppe of Cupertino, he was a monk, not really known for being too bright, but then somehow he was blessed with the mystical ability to fly. And although in the first painting it just looks like somebody just threw him out of a house, he was really flying, and he would go to crosses and go to altars flying. And this was attested to by a lot of witnesses at the time. So anyway, go to the next slide, please. Here, one of the lines go, Giuseppe's was not intellectual belief, not feeble of mind, he had no issue with reason. Content with the day's sky and starlight, he had only delight. Now, to me, this really, I mean, it's really interesting that a poet from UP, a secular school, writes one of the best, for me, one of the best poems about a saint. Because it really captures the mystical experience, which is what enables the mystic to fly, to experience visions, is the ecstasy of being in communion with the divine. Now, you will notice in Sir Jimmy's poems, he would say things like getting real, or presenting to us with the concept that somehow there is something behind and inside language, in the same place where our dreams came from. Which is why, to me, when I read these poems, the voice I hear is the sort of voice that maybe the ancients heard from their oracles, or from their seers, or from their mages, or from their alchemists. Because Sir Jimmy's poetry is always preoccupied or concerned with finding out what is behind and beyond our imaginations in our language. This is the place where we know, but do not know how we know what we know. So it's this dark place where dreams come from. It's, some people call it an oneric voice. It's the voice of the oneros, the gods of dreams. That's where poetry comes from. And I agree with that. But you could say that all knowledge comes from the same place. And poetry is just one of the ways that this place is illuminated. And we are able to reach into this unknowing, unknowable place through poetry. Which is the same as mystical knowledge and mystical experience. You just feel the delight. The delight takes you up, makes you fly, but you can't explain it. Next poem, please. Now, the millipede's problem, which is in the section of the book, Mind. I love this poem because it's a poem written from English. This is a concept that we learned from Sir Jimmy, of course, that we write not in English, but from English. Ano ba ang millipede? Sing-sing pare, it is such a common experience for every Filipino child, I think, growing up in the city or in the province. So, next slide, please. It's a meditation on not the millipede itself, but how the millipede is some sort of mental puzzle where you don't really know why. The structure of the millipede is beyond explanation. Because it is not necessary to have 1,000 legs. So why does it have it? So in a way, it's sort of like the mind contemplating itself. You can't really know the mind using the mind. Next slide, please. Here, we have, I'm going to read the lines. Consider that small body, its bright armor of soft metal, beyond our skill in forgery, and how it moves in the dust like a lesson in patience. To understand him, sir, we must first learn to move toward that reality which even he suggests. So that's really how the mind works. It moves without us knowing how it moves. And we can only know our consciousness. We cannot know the millipede's reality. So only the millipede knows why it needs 1,000 legs. But we'll only know that if we can somehow enter the millipede's consciousness. Next slide, please. Now, I am a mental health activist, shall we say. I founded a mental health support group back in 2013, and the poem "Suicide," and I always associated for the longest time Sir Jimmy with poems about light, the mystical, the bright things. So this poem, I didn't see this poem the first time in this book. I saw it somewhere else. So, but it surprised me when I saw it because um, it just made me think. Oh, so Sir Jimmy can still get pretty dark, you know, contrary to my previous impressions. But what interested me about this are the lines, "But would I have thought it," meaning suicidium, Latin for self-killing. Would I have thought it if I had not already encoded in blood its special word? Next slide, please. How to cross my own fixed doom if someone else's blood before me had not already named his knife's special drink. Next slide, please. Now, I read about suicide research a lot because it's part of how I help people in our group. And there is one researcher has studied what they call the suicide trance, which is really what happens when before a person successfully does suicidium. Every one of us, based on these studies, really, it looks like we all have the capacity for suicidium. It's like there is something encoded in our brains that when activated and triggered will result in what's called a suicide trance, where it's like when you have a computer and a virus is taking over the computer, this other code activates and controls the computer. That's what happens when you're in a suicide trance. You really cannot no longer stop yourself from suicidium. So it's only luck and the intervention of others will stop you from being successful. Next slide, please. And the tarsier is there because this code for suicide exists not just in humans. Tarsiers especially are known to kill themselves when they are stressed, which is why when we first started keeping tarsiers in captivity, a lot of them were killing themselves. These are wild animals and they cannot abide the presence of humans. So the way they do it is they jump on a tree and they smash their own heads against the tree. And they can't stop themselves. It's the code activated in their brains. So this is the researcher on suicide trance, Mr. Richard Heckler, and that's his book, Waking Up Alive. Next slide, please. I think it's significant that using the poet's art, the way a poet thinks, Sir Jimmy was able to express something that a researcher, a psychological researcher, would also write a book about. They would describe the same thing. Now, this is one of my favorite poems in the book, simply because to me, it has this melancholy, this sadness to it, melancholy quality and sadness of a father, maybe even a poet or a national artist, thinking about the future and what it holds for the next generation. So I won't read the earlier part, but to me, that's also part of what makes Sir Jimmy's poetry very personal and yet also national. Next slide, please. So I'm going to read the stanza below, let me just tell you now about the Chinese banyan tree by my window. Tonight, it is my father, because his love was like a great tree, but without speech. Every morning on that banyan tree, many species of birds are in full throat. Next slide, please. So that now I wonder, would my sons, years from now, gather from a tree's silence my own heart's affection, and in that moment know that once, while I made their world, I had deeply wished, when they shall have left that world behind, I would be the tree to their morning. Do not miss reading this book. If you want to get to know what Filipino poetry is, to experience poetry as a Filipino, this is one book you should not do without. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ramil, for those words. Just to make a quick recap, also, it's so interesting how Dr. Abad is a poet both of place and not of place. And speaking of theory and poetics, Dr. Abad is very willing to embrace aporias, apparently, entrapments that are liberating and both confining. So thank you very much for our panelists' input today. We will now have the open forum. We have until 5 o'clock in the afternoon for our questions. So this is open to the members of the audience as well as the panelists. So I'm wondering if the panelists would be comfortable going back to the table. That would be great. But please, let's just all be comfortable this afternoon. Let me get the ball rolling and ask the question. Since Sir Ramil touched upon a very sensitive topic, which Dr. Abad touched on. This is something of interest to me as a poet myself. I'm concerned about crossing overs because there is an ethics in the blood, according to Dr. Concepcion, and there is the light in the blood that is supposed to give life. But at the same time, we touch on these sensitive topics that are part of our own experience, but also are the experience of others. I wonder if we can say anything about Dr. Abad's poetry leading us to think about the way we cross over, the way we tackle issues, the way we talk about possibly experiences that are not just of ourselves but of others. I wonder if the panelists or anyone in the audience would like to explore that idea. So this is just to get the ball rolling. Ideally, later on, tuloy-tuloy na tayo, maging rhizomatic tayo, no? Parang sunod-sunod na ang mga katanungan. Salamat.
So, Nico, are you asking or are you wondering about how to write about these topics of crossing over, or what are you?
Not so much the how yet, but perhaps just a general perspective on what if I do it and what, and maybe then that's when we cross over to the how. No? Parang after that, iisipin ano yung mga konsiderasyon natin bilang manunulat, no? Ayun.
Yeah.
So,
in my case, I have written on it because my own background as someone diagnosed with bipolar and ADHD, and have been, gone through attempts at suicidio since college. Of course, I cannot help but write about it. But other poets who have gone through it also are not able to. I think the consideration of whether to write about it or not should really come from the same oneric place beyond, dark place beyond language, that if a poet feels called, or any writer feels called to write about it, then maybe that's the first signal that maybe you should. However, if your motivation, I think, is to write from a place where you just have a strong opinion about it, that's where it can be dangerous, because surprisingly, a lot of people have wrong and potentially harmful ideas about suicide that might be triggering to some members of the audience. It's not really, it's not enough to just write an opinion about it. I think it's always a consideration how what you write will impact certain readers. Because, like I said, we already have so many wrong ideas about suicide in our society that has actually resulted in deaths of young people. In my experience, as someone who helps people who are suicidal, a lot of times in young people, it's the wrong ideas of the parents that push their kids to finally, suicidium. So, but if you're a writer and you want to pursue that, you feel a call to do it, that's when you have to do your research and to really get into what goes on that leads to that profoundly destructive act. You just have to do enough research on it to make sure you're not gonna reinforce wrong ideas.
Thank you. Sususugan ko lang yung sinabi, no? Yung parang, I think, from starting from the poetics of Sir Jim, no? And something that Ma'am Merly said earlier, that when Sir Jim speaks in his poems, it's not a persona, it's himself. And the, the philosophical conviction of Sir Jim that when we speak language, 'di ba? As poets, 'di ba, as writers, or even as human beings, we must care for getting it right, where the meaning is not the meaning of our words or what even we want to say, but actually it's a searching, 'di ba? Following a desire to express what we have already perceived and what we already know, 'di ba? So, kung hindi mo alam ang karanasan, bakit mo siya isusulat, 'di ba? Ano ang basihan mo para sulatin ang isang karanasang hindi iyo, 'di ba? Ano ang alam mo tungkol doon? So, yun yung mga konsiderasyon sa palagay ko. Maaaring meron tayong isang objective, 'di ba? Maaaring gusto nating magprotesta, maaaring gusto nating magwala, 'di ba? Pero yun nga, tulad ng sabi ni Sir Ramil, ano naman yung magiging epekto ng salita mo? Kung nagsasalita ka at walang laman, hungkag yung salita mo, haka-haka lang.
All right, thank you very much, Tin and Sir Ramil. Would anyone like to ask more questions? I'd also like to inform everybody that Ma'am Merly Alunan and Dr. Giselle Concepcion are in the Zoom room. So if you have concerns and questions, you may want to ask them too. So would anyone like to come forward with a concern or a comment? Yeah. Okay.
One, two, three. Oh, perfect. Okay. Hello and good afternoon. Sorry. Hi, Sir Jimmy. Thank you so much to our panelists for your wonderful interdisciplinary insights. And thank you, most of all, to Ma'am Tin Lao especially. You mentioned something about how Sir Jimmy's poetry is more epistemological rather than metaphysical. And I thought that was such a very acute, very precise quote to say because I never noticed it before. And when you brought it out, that's all I can see now. So the question I would like to ask is related to that, and I direct it to all of the knowledgeable members of our panel. Because when you observe Sir Jimmy's poetry, the way he treats the word is something like a magical system, a very, I suppose, mystical object almost, a kind of force. So I was wondering what the word has to do, what's its relation to reality. Does the word denote a reality? Is it unchanging once it's been put down, or is the word something that shapes reality effectively? That it's its agent, I suppose. It's something that changes it, and by extension, is reality itself something absolute or fluid? I know it's a very opaque question to ask, very, I don't know, difficult to start off, but I was hoping that you could lend your interdisciplinary sort of perspectives, maybe to make it more concrete. Thank you very much.
Wow. Okay. Actually, actually, in this book, I have answered your question in the preface to the book. Okay. uh, uh, what we call our world, our reality, is only our human reality. We have no other reality than our human reality. You know what that? You know what that is? What do we know? No. What do we know? And then the first answer to that is, the more we know, the less we know. Oh, son of a gun. No? Okay, so, what do we know? Huh? What we know is only our experience of life. Huh? Okay. What is that? What is that knowledge, that experience? It is our consciousness, our own sense, our own awareness of what is real, what is true, what is right, what is just. Our consciousness. You know, kaibigan, you know what I am crazy about? No? Huh? I am crazy about the etymology of words. The etymology of words. You know why? You know why I'm crazy about words? You know, because in our beginning as human, you look up the word human. Etymology. Humus. And you know what it means? Soil. ground, earth. Human. Now, in our beginning as human being, or being, to become, to be, to become real, to become alive, no? In our beginning as human is the word, verbal language. In our beginning is the word. And the word, therefore, is our way, our life, our truth. The word. Without the word, what is, huh? Without the word, verbal language. Without the words, we have no memory, no history, no culture, no civilization. Huh? Without the word. Our future is shaped by our words. You know, kaibigan, and what is that language? What is that verbal language? Words. It is our invention. It is our invention. Without words, our consciousness of reality is blank. We would have no knowledge. And then finally, I would say, you know what is the most difficult knowledge? Bahar, what is the most difficult knowledge? Self-knowledge. Ho, 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 ho. Self-knowledge is the most difficult knowledge because when you are young, you're a teenager, you're an adult, you know yourself more and more. But you get to know yourself only if you meditate, you reflect, you go inside your consciousness. You talk to yourself. Who am I now? Yeah, who am I now? That's the most difficult knowledge of all. You know? And all you have, all you really have is words. Now, you know, kaibigan, language. You look up the word language. It comes from old French tongue, dila, tongue. The organ of speech and the organ of taste. Sarap. Ay, hindi masarap. Na? The organ of taste. Tongue. It is as though with language we would savor the living of life. With language. Without language, we have nothing. Every language is sacred, whether it is Tagalog or Bisaya or English or Spanish or German. Every language is sacred. Without language, you have no literature. Without literature, you have no memory. Our, our literature is our people's memory. A country is only as strong as their people's memory. And without memory, nothing. Huh? Follow? God, all these words, all these things, one whole. Huh? One whole. Reality is one whole. Universe. And reality is mystery. Reality is mystery. No. One last word, kaibigan. Look up the word faith. About Christian faith, Protestant faith. You look up the word faith. Words are very tricky. Huh? Words are very tricky. You look up the words faith. Faith, I have faith in you. That means I trust you. No? I have faith. That means I am convinced. I have conviction. Huh? Now, if I have faith, I have belief, I have conviction, then I have commitment, I have allegiance. No? Okay? No. Words are so important in whatever language. No. Without language, we are nothing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abad. It maybe I just like to add my own to not add to what Sir said, but just trying to show how I understand what Dr. Abad is saying. When we talk about writing poetry and poetics, it seems that Dr. Abad takes on a phenomenological approach to the word, no? And one of the things that we will have to explore to, for example, Dr. Abad in his dissertation writes about how poetry itself is a different source of knowledge as compared to philosophy. So Dr. Abad comes, I think, it's very interesting to explore later on the poetic line that Dr. Abad comes from, especially now that we are oriented towards different poetics. For example, if you have an Ocean Vuong writing about how language can be queered, or if there is a materialist poetry wherein there are social conflicts shown, different classes, I think to appreciate Dr. Abad will have to come from that phenomenological approach. And that might be something you might want, especially for the creative writers in this room, you may want to explore that as you explore finding your own voice. Yes, sir.
May I add something pa? May I add something
Of course,
more?
sir. Yan yung microphone.
Yeah. 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 Kaibigan, language, no? Language. Um, um, I already told you about the origin of language, no? Yeah. Hey, kaibigan. And then poetics. What is poetics? Okay. Yung poetics, kaibigan, I love that word, kaibigan. Because love, ibig, kaibigan. But anyway, yung language, poetics muna, poetics. Now, yung poetics, kaibigan, it has to do with art, no, skill, craft. Okay? Therefore, what are those arts? Oh, the art of painting, the art of music, the art of sculpture, even the art of architecture. No? Okay? Yeah. Poetics yan. Now, look up the word poem. Etymology. Poem. From Greek word poiein. To create. To create. To make real. That's to create. So, the arts, painting, poetry, etc., it's all creation. Make it real. You make it, you construct it. Yan. Yan ang poetry. No, poiein. To create, to make real. Now, but not only poetry with literature. No, also painting, sculpture, architecture. Yeah. Okay? Yun. That's what I want to add. Oo.
Sir, thank you very much. I think let's give Dr. Abad a round of applause. Truly, it's an afternoon, I think, wherein, especially with that last impassioned statement, he gives us our heart. It is a sursum corda, according to his mentor, Professor Dado Falza, who mentioned that years ago, and he still gives us our heart today. So, before we end I'm sorry, it's already 4:48. We'll have to wrap up at 5 o'clock because of, we'd like to observe our time. I would like to call on the Deputy Director of the UP-ICW for her closing remarks, Dr. Luna Sikat Cleto.
Kung paboritong salita ni Sir Jimmy ang kaibigan, ang paboritong salita ko naman ay ang mismong salita. At sa tingin ko, anumang idaragdag ko, para sa hapong ito ay maaring hindi nyo na matandaan dahil punong-puno na kayo ng narinig, naisip, at maraming mga blanco, guwang, bangin, tulay na ating naengkwentro sa pakikinig sa hapong ito. At kung ang pakikinig ay isang essential life skill, sa palagay ko, ang pangunahing gawain talaga ng Makata ay hindi lang ang makinig sa kanyang panloob na boses o sa pag-aapuhap niya ng pagkakilala sa kanyang sarili. Tingin ko na ituro ni Sir Jimmy Abad, National Artist for Literature, na ang dapat nating pakinggan ay ibang tao bukod pa sa ating sarili, ang komunidad, ang fiction na tinatawag nating bayan o nasyon. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng nakinig sa hapong ito at lalo na sa ating mga bisita na sina Dr. Mahar Mangahas, Professor Christine Lau, Ramil Gulye, poet par excellence, Dr. Ramon Guillermo, at kapiling natin sa ating Zoom room na sina Professor Emeritus Merly Alunan at Professor Emeritus Gisela Concepcion. At higit sa lahat, ang pambansang alagad ng sining para sa panitikan na si Sir Jimmy Abad. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Dito na po nagtatapos ang ating Interdisciplinary Book Forum.
Maraming salamat, Ma'am Luna. So, gaya nga nasabi niya, dito na po nagtatapos ang ating forum. Maaari pong mabili ang aklat The Light in One's Blood from UP Press. So please make sure to get a copy and know Jimmy Abad better through the words in the book. So, yun. Maraming salamat po sa lahat at magandang hapon po. May picture taking. Sinong kasama? Lahat ng... Okay, yung panel... yes. Okay. Sige. Ayan. Naku. Yikes! Alright, sorry. Sorry po. Aabot lang tayo ng ating certificates sa ating mga panel speakers. So, this certificate of appreciation is given to Dr. Ramon Guillermo for participating as panelist of the 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, June 7, 2023. Signed, Dr. Joey Bakiran, Director of UP Institute of Creative Writing, and Dr. Neil Garcia, Director of the UP Press. The certificate of appreciation is given to Dr. Mahar K. Mangahas for participating as panelist of the 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, given this June 7, 2023. Signed, Dr. Bakiran and Dr. Neil Garcia. The certificate of appreciation is given to Christine V. Lau for participating as panelist of the 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, given this June 7, 2023, signed Dr. Bakiran and Dr. Garcia. The certificate of appreciation is given to Mr. Ramil Digalgulia for participating as panelist of the 13th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, given this June 7, 2023, signed Dr. Bakiran and Dr. Garcia. Okay, so may I ask the panel members present here in the room to please come together for a picture, for a group picture. And may I ask for Dr. Bakiran and Dr. Luna Sikatleta to join them in front. Okay. Yes, and Dr. Abad, of course, in the middle. Yeah.